Welcome to our deep dive on Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, a classic.
It is, and we're going to be using some really interesting sources for this one.
Okay.
Like a mix of film notes, analyses, and a little historical context, too.
Sounds like a good mix.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people might think of this movie as just like a kind of simple B-movie.
Yeah, it's got that reputation for sure.
But the thing is, it really, it just keeps sparking debate, like, decades later, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's got staying power for a reason.
And that's kind of what we want to uncover, like, what is it about this film that just keeps haunting us? You know, is it just a creepy story about aliens?
Right.
Or is there something deeper going on?
Well, I think one of the things that's so fascinating about this film is how it works on these like multiple levels.
Okay.
On the one hand, it's this super thrilling, suspenseful story about these, alien pogs replacing humans.
Right.
But then, like, at the same time, it taps into these really primal fears about loss of identity, the dangers of conformity and, really even like the nature of what it means to be human, what makes us human.
Yeah, and thinking about it too, it's interesting that this film was made in 1956.
Oh, yeah.
Which, if you think about it, like post-World War II, the Cold War was starting to heat up.
Right.
McCarthyism, the Red Scare.
A lot of anxiety in the area.
There was all this like paranoia and suspicion. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's where the historical context becomes like super crucial to understanding, I think, the impact of this film.
Okay.
You have Don Siegel, the director, who is working within the B-movie genre,
Right.
which often allowed filmmakers to address these really kind of complex social issues, but without attracting too much attention.
Oh, I see.
From the studio censors and stuff.
So they could kind of slip under the radar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sneaking in these subversive ideas into what seemed like straightforward genre films.
It's like hiding a message in plain sight.
Exactly.
Kind of a Trojan horse.
Yeah, totally.
Right. But I think before we get too deep into all the symbolism and the subtext,
Right.
maybe we should quickly recap the plot for anyone who might need like a refresher.
Sure. Yeah.
Or hasn't seen it.
So, basically, the film follows this doctor, Dr. Miles Bennell,
Okay.
who returns to his hometown, Santa Mira, California, right?
Uh-huh.
Which seems very idyllic, like on the surface.
Right. Charming.
But he quickly realizes that something is really, really wrong.
Okay.
People are acting strange, and his patients are coming to him claiming that their loved ones have been replaced.
Oh, that's creepy.
Right. Like by emotionless duplicates.
Yeah. And it's interesting how the creepiness in this film is like it builds so gradually.
Yeah, it's not like a bam in your face kind of thing.
It's not like big explosions and aliens landing and all that. It's very like
subtle. Yeah.
Subtle, unsettling, like these small details that kind of slowly reveal how horrifying everything is.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the little things that get under your skin. Think about that early scene where you have this child running away from his mother, terrified because he's convinced she's not his real mother.
Right.
Or even just the image of like the roadside stand, usually bustling with people,
Right.
but it's totally deserted.
Oh, yeah.
And Siegel uses these things, these everyday moments,
Right.
to just create this growing sense of unease,
Yeah, it's like he's playing with our expectations.
Totally.
We think alien invasion, we think, spaceships and lasers and all that.
Right, the big spectacle.
But it's much more like insidious, this slow creeping takeover.
And that's what makes it so effective, I think.
Yeah, it's so much more relatable in a way, just the fear of the familiar becoming strange.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then, of course, there's that scene where Dr. Bennell and his friends discover the unfinished body in Jack Belichick's greenhouse.
Oh, yeah.
And it's such a chilling visual, like this blank, almost human form that starts to take on Jack's features right in front of them. And that's when the real horror becomes undeniable.
It becomes real, yeah.
There's a great anecdote about that scene, actually.
Oh.
Apparently, Siegel snuck one of the pod props under Dana Winter's bed while they were filming.
No way.
Yeah, just to kind of, add to the creepiness factor on set.
Oh, I bet she was surprised.
Oh, I can only imagine.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it just shows how much Siegel was, like, really using every trick he could to create this truly unsettling experience for the audience.
And it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, that scene, like countless others from the film, has really stuck with people for decades.
Right.
But it does raise a question, though, like, who are these pod people and what do they actually represent? There are so many different interpretations. It's like every new critic adds another layer to this already complex film.
Yeah, are they like a metaphor for communist infiltrators, which is what some critics have said?
Right.
Or is it more about just this general fear of conformity, the loss of individuality?
Yeah, I mean, that's a theme that really resonates across time and cultures. It's not tied to any one specific historical moment.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you think?
Well, one of the most insightful perspectives I came across is from film historian Carlos Clarence.
Okay.
And he argues that, like, the true horror of science fiction isn't necessarily, like, death or destruction, but dehumanization. Like the loss of our emotions, our free will.
Yeah.
What makes us essentially human.
Like our essence.
Exactly. And isn't that really what the pod people embody?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how the film depicts the process of being podded. It's not just this physical transformation.
Right. Yeah.
It's this gradual, like, erosion of personality, the loss of empathy.
And critical thinking.
And that's really terrifying.
Exactly.
Because it's like this fear of losing ourselves.
Right. And that's one of the things that's so brilliant about this film.
Okay.
It doesn't explicitly tell you what the pod people represent.
Right.
It leaves it open to the audience to project their own fears and anxieties onto the story.
Oh, so it's like everyone brings their own baggage to it.
Yeah, and that ambiguity, that's a big part of what makes the film so relevant.
So it's like it's holding a mirror up to society.
Yeah.
And forcing us to kind of confront our own anxieties about, conformity, loss of individuality.
Yeah, things that might be trying to control us,
Yeah. But what I find really fascinating is how Siegel uses these specific visual and narrative techniques to convey all these complex themes.
Oh, yeah. There are some really clever things going on there. Yeah, like, for example, think about the lighting.
Okay.
He uses a lot of low-key lighting and deep shadows, and it creates this constant sense of, like, unease.
Right, like anything could jump out from the shadows.
Exactly. And it's also like a visual representation of the paranoia that was so prevalent in 1950s America.
Right, like the style of the film itself is reflecting the psychology of the characters and the society. Yeah, that's cool.
And then you've got those incredible close-up shots.
Oh, yeah, especially on the faces of the pod people.
Go blank. Right.
Yeah, they're just devoid of emotion. It's chilling.
It's really effective at conveying that dehumanizing effect of the invasion.
Yeah.
It really highlights the loss of individuality.
Right, those little quirks that make us human. And speaking of dehumanization, I mean, we have to talk about that iconic line from the film. There's no pain.
Oh, chills.
Only the end of pain.
Every time.
It's so creepy, especially the way it's delivered.
Right.
So matter-of-factly.
Like it's a good thing.
Yeah, like it's this selling point for conformity,
Right, like just give in and all your anxieties will disappear.
But we see in the film it comes at a huge cost.
A terrible price, yeah.
Our freedom, our individuality.
Our souls even.
Right, and that brings us to the ending, which has got to be one of the most iconic and debated endings in sci-fi cinema history.
It's unforgettable.
Miles Bennell, desperate to warn everyone, he runs onto the highway.
Right into traffic.
Screaming, "You're next." But nobody listens to him.
Nobody believes him.
They just think he's crazy, and it's such a bleak image.
It really is, yeah.
But also powerful.
It speaks to the power of mass delusion and how fear and conformity can blind us to the truth.
Even when it's right there in front of us, yeah.
And Siegel really knew how to create a haunting and thought-provoking ending.
Yeah, he did.
It's interesting, though, the studio actually tried to soften that ending.
Oh, really? What did they do?
They made Siegel add a prologue and epilogue to frame the story as a flashback, like Bennell's recounting his experience to these skeptical authorities.
So they were trying to make it less bleak.
Right, like reassure the audience that everything would be okay in the end.
But it feels so hollow,
It undermines the whole message of the film.
Yeah, it's like they were afraid of the film's own power.
Exactly, they wanted to control it.
But the original ending, it leaves us with this feeling of unease.
That lingering question,
And it's a question that still resonates today, maybe even more than in 1956.
Definitely.
And, speaking of resonance, it's remarkable how Invasion of the Body Snatchers has inspired so many other filmmakers.
Oh, yeah, there have been so many remakes.
Each with their own unique take on the story, reflecting the anxieties of their time.
Like the 1978 remake, directed by Philip Kaufman.
Yeah, that one was much darker.
Yeah, way more psychologically disturbing than the original.
It really reflected that post-Watergate cynicism.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's Abel Ferrara's 1993 version.
Right, that one focused on the military.
Yeah, exploring themes of environmental contamination and government secrets.
It's like each generation finds its own way to fear the loss of individuality.
And the forces that want to control us, yeah.
And it's not just in film, is it? We see these themes everywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
Our anxieties about technology,
Social media.
how our identities are shaped online.
It's like the pod people have become a universal symbol for anything that threatens our sense of self.
You know, one thing that really surprised me while researching this was the connection to Halloween the 3rd, Season of the Witch.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
It's not an obvious one, but the director, Tommy Lee Wallace, actually used some of the same filming locations as Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
As like an homage.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
That's a cool little detail.
It shows how influential the film has been.
Yeah, even in unexpected places.
But beyond all the homages and remakes,
Yeah.
I think the real power of Invasion of the Body Snatchers lies in its ability to make us question our own realities.
Absolutely. It challenges us to look at our own lives and ask, what are the pods in our own lives? What's trying to make us conform?
Trying to rob us of our individuality, yeah.
And maybe even more importantly, are we letting it happen?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It all circles back to that idea of dehumanization.
Right.
Are we letting ourselves become numb?
Losing our empathy.
Or compassion?
Yeah, in the face of all the pressures of modern life.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
It is.
And it's a thought that Invasion of the Body Snatchers, with all its chilling imagery and thought-provoking themes, continues to force us to confront.
Yeah, it really makes you think, huh?
It does. It's amazing how a film made almost 70 years ago can still feel so relevant.
Yeah, it's really a testament to the power of good storytelling, I think.
It is, and the fact that these human anxieties, they just keep coming back.
Yeah, they do. And what's really interesting about Invasion of the Body Snatchers is that it doesn't give you any easy answers.
It doesn't try to solve the problem for you.
No, it just shows you this horrifying scenario and then lets you figure out what it means.
It leaves you with questions.
And maybe that's why it keeps sparking all this debate.
Yeah, like different interpretations,
Everyone sees something different in it.
It's like a Rorschach test, reflecting our own anxieties back at us.
Yeah, I like that, a Rorschach test for society.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so rewarding to revisit, I think.
Oh yeah, you can watch it multiple times.
And each time you notice something new.
You bring your own experiences to it.
Absolutely, it's like a conversation with the film.
Talking about all these different layers.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much they packed into a B-movie.
It really is. Siegel was a really skilled director.
He was. He knew how to create suspense.
Even on a limited budget.
Yeah, he didn't need fancy special effects.
He understood how to use suggestion.
Letting the audience fill in the blanks.
With their own fears.
And that's a technique that still works today.
Oh yeah, you see all the time in modern horror and sci-fi.
So anyone listening who hasn't seen Invasion of the Body Snatchers,
definitely check it out.
It's a classic for a reason.
And if you have seen it,
maybe it's time for a rewatch.
With a fresh perspective.
You might be surprised by what you notice.
Absolutely. And don't forget the remakes.
Oh yeah, they're worth watching too.
They offer some really interesting takes on the story.
Each one reflecting its own time.
Like a cinematic conversation across the decades.
Yeah, each filmmaker adding their own voice.
To this ongoing discussion about conformity, identity.
And the forces that shape our world.
It's a fascinating conversation to be a part of.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
It's been a journey.
It has, exploring the historical context, the themes, the legacy.
And even some unexpected connections.
We hope this has given you plenty to think about.
And maybe even inspired you to revisit the film.
With a fresh set of eyes.
Sleep tight.
And watch out for pods.
Haha, always good advice.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for listening.
We hope you enjoyed our exploration of this classic film.
And as always,
stay curious, question everything, and never stop fighting for your individuality.